Rose Willow was stunned when she saw the stranger at her door. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Your Aunt Lily left you some money." The man, wearing a cheap suit, gave a condescending smile. "Yes, that's right. It turns out your aunt was actually quite rich, even though most people didn't know. It's funny how old people can surprise us, isn't it?" Rose laughed in disbelief. "Rich? You must be mistaken. She lived like she had no money at all." "Well, whether you believe it or not," the man said with a shrug, "you need to be at the reading of her will this Friday at 3 p.m. at McGrady and Sons law offices downtown. Don't be late." He tipped his hat and walked away. "Wait," Rose called out, but the man was already hurrying to his car. She shut the door slowly, feeling confused. An inheritance from Aunt Lily? It didn't make any sense. Rose sat at her small kitchen table, sipping coffee while she thought about her great-aunt. They had never been close. Lily had always been grumpy and stingy, rarely saying anything nice. Still, Rose had tried to be there for her, helping with chores, bringing food, and celebrating her birthdays. Despite Lily's unpleasantness, Rose always stayed polite. Her husband Tony had little patience for Lily. He had only met her a few times before their wedding and occasionally after. That was enough for him. He thought her way of living and her nasty comments about him were reason enough to avoid her. Rose sat there trying to make sense of the lawyer's claims. Could it be true that Aunt Lily had been secretly wealthy all this time? She thought about what she could do with an inheritance. Maybe she could finally quit her second job at the diner and get a good night's sleep. Looking at the clock, Rose realized she was running late for her shift. She quickly finished her coffee, grabbed her purse, and headed out the door. She needed to call Tony from the bus and tell him about this strange news. Fortunately, Rose found a seat on the crowded bus. She took out her phone and called Tony, hoping he was up for a chat. "Hey, babe," he answered sleepily. "What's going on?" "You won't believe this," Rose said. "A lawyer just visited me and said Aunt Lily left me an inheritance." "An inheritance? Can you believe it?" Tony said, surprised. "The old lady had some hidden money, apparently," Rose replied. "I have to go to the will reading on Friday afternoon. I'm not sure what to think." "Well, that's good news," Tony said, trying to sound upbeat. "Maybe you can finally take a break from work. You really deserve one." Rose gave a sad smile. "If only it were that easy. We'll see. How are you feeling today? Any news from your mom?" Tony's mother, Sarah, worked at Mercy Hospital and was trying to get him seen by specialists for his ongoing health issues. Tony's condition made it hard for him to keep a job, and he often ended up in the ER due to panic attacks. Rose had been working extra hard to pay for his costly vitamins and supplements. "Oh, just the same," Tony said with a sigh. "Maybe it's time to accept that I'm just going to be like this. Having a baby might be a bad idea with my health." Rose felt a pang in her heart, thinking about their plans to try for a baby this year. "Don't say that," she said softly. "You're going to get better. I believe that. Just keep resting and let your mom help you. I'll visit you at the hospital tomorrow." After saying, "I love you," she hung up. When hanging up, Rose looked out the bus window, trying to stay positive despite Tony's negativity. She hoped this inheritance might be the break they needed. The next morning, Rose went to room 242 at Mercy Hospital, eager to see Tony. She knocked twice and walked in with a big smile, but her smile quickly faded when she saw Tony scowling at her from his bed. "Hey, babe," she said cheerfully, leaning in for a kiss. Tony turned his head away. "You didn't put on any makeup today? Seriously?" he complained. "Every other wife on this floor looks like a model, and I get stuck with a mess." Rose felt hurt. "Tony, how can you say that? I'm exhausted from working so much. I barely have time to." Yeah, you're a big martyr," he interrupted, cutting her off and waving his hand. "When's that inheritance money coming in? Hopefully soon, so you can actually make yourself look decent." Rose fought back tears and quickly left the room. She walked down the hallway and sat on a bench near the elevators, feeling defeated. Was this really what her marriage had become? As she sat with her head in her hands, she overheard two male patients chatting nearby. "I told my wife I had to stay here for tests this weekend," one said with a laugh. "Seriously, I've got a poker game with the orderly and enough booze for a party." "Same here," his friend replied with a grin. What they don't know won't hurt them. They think we're saints for being here. Rose felt sick. Was this how all men acted behind closed doors? She shook her head, telling herself that Tony wasn't like that. He was just grumpy from being stuck in the hospital. Taking a deep breath, she dried her eyes and stepped out into the sunlight. Tomorrow was the big day, and she needed to stay focused. Friday morning was clear and crisp. Rose woke up early, determined to clean the apartment before Tony came home on Monday. She still found it hard to believe she might be getting an inheritance. Her family had never had much money, but maybe this was the fresh start they needed. She arrived at the lawyer's office an hour early and was greeted by a friendly receptionist who led her to a plush waiting room. "Coffee?" the young woman asked. "Yes, please," Rose said, grateful. She settled into a fancy emerald green armchair, which likely cost more than her entire living room set. Just as she was adding cream and sugar to her coffee, her cell phone began to buzz nonstop. "Tony, let me guess. You're calling to find out how big the inheritance is," Rose answered, rolling her eyes with a smile. "Oh, yeah," Tony replied. "Can you blame me? This is a big deal. What's the news?" "I won't know anything for at least another hour," she said patiently. "I promise you'll be the first to hear when I have the details." As the minutes went by, Rose grew more anxious. What if the inheritance was a huge amount? What if it was just a small sum? When her name was finally called, her heart raced. "Miss Willow, please come with me." The soft carpet muffled Rose's footsteps as she was guided into a grand office lined with law books. An older man in a three-piece suit stood up from behind a large oak desk to shake her hand. "Miss Willow, I'm Bernard McGrady. I'm glad you could come today." "Thank you for having me," Rose said, taking a seat across from him. "I have to admit, this is all a bit overwhelming. My Aunt Lily never talked about her finances." Mr. McGrady chuckled. "Yes, she was known for being quite frugal, but I can assure you your great-aunt Lily had a significant fortune." He handed her a file folder. Rose opened it with shaking hands and almost fell out of her chair when she saw the number on the page. This can't be right," she gasped. "There are too many zeros. It says $6.2 million. Mr. McGrady smiled and said, "I assure you there's no mistake." Rose held the folder to her chest, her head spinning. 6.2 million, more money than she'd ever imagined. She felt a hysterical laugh rising in her throat. She couldn't wait to tell Tony. With trembling fingers, she pulled out her phone and quickly typed a text to her husband. "Inherit is $6,200. Can you believe it?" In her excitement, she didn't notice she had left out the last 3 crucial zeros before hitting send. Unable to stay any longer, Rose made a quick excuse about needing to process the news and hurried out of the office, clutching the folder with her new future in her arms. She needed to see Tony immediately and share this life-changing news. He was going to be stunned. Skipping the bus, Rose grabbed a cab and told the driver to head to Mercy Hospital. She fidgeted anxiously as they drove through the city, eager to get there. When they arrived, she threw a handful of cash at the driver and rushed inside, taking the stairs 2 at a time to the second floor, thrilled to share the incredible news with Tony. As she neared room 242, she heard familiar voices and stopped outside the door. It was Tony and his mother, Sarah, talking. Though she knew she shouldn't eavesdrop, she felt compelled to listen. "And the stupid cow actually fell for it." Tony's voice dripped with contempt. "Can you believe she thinks I'm really sick? Like I'd spend time in this awful place if I didn't have to." Sarah laughed. "You've got her completely fooled. She's so naive. I still can't believe you married someone like that." "Tell me about it," Tony groaned. "But did you hear the best part? Aunt Lily left some money. Once it's in my account, I'm done with her. She can find someone else to play nurse and housekeeper." Rose felt her face go pale. She blinked rapidly, unable to believe what she was hearing. It felt like a nightmare, but Tony and Sarah's laughter made it all too real. Her entire marriage, her whole life with Tony, had been a lie. Unable to listen any longer, she turned and ran, not noticing the tears streaming down her face. She ran until her lungs burned and her feet ached. When she finally stopped to catch her breath, she found herself by the East River, staring at the murky water. As she watched the swirling currents, she heard Aunt Lily's voice echoing in her mind. "That boy is a lazy freeloader who will drain you dry." Aunt Lily had warned Rose after meeting Tony. Mark my words, Missy, you're making a huge mistake. At the time, Rose had dismissed it as the grumbling of a bitter old woman. But now, with her heart broken, she saw the truth clearly. Aunt Lily had been right, and somehow she had made sure Rose had the means to break free before it was too late. Straightening her shoulders, Rose turned away from the river and walked down the sidewalk with determination. She had calls to make and divorce papers to file. Tony would be in for a shock when he came home on Monday to find the apartment empty. For now, Rose planned to stay with her best friend Mila for a few days and then take a much-needed solo trip to the Hamptons to heal. As the warm June sun touched her face, Rose felt a spark of hope. Maybe her life wasn't ruined after all. Maybe this was the beginning of an amazing new chapter. She couldn't wait to see what the future held. 3 days later, Tony limped to the door of their apartment, prescription pain meds in hand. "Honey, I'm home," he called out sarcastically. "Where's my inheritance check?" Silence was his only answer. He looked around, noticing for the first time that the walls were bare and the shelves empty. A single sheet of paper lay on the kitchen counter. "Tony," it began in Rose's familiar handwriting, "by the time you read this, I'll be long gone. In case you haven't figured it out, I know everything. I know you've been faking illness to avoid working. I know you and your mother have been mocking me, and I know you were planning to take my money and leave. Well, the joke's on you. That inheritance wasn't $62,000. It was $6.2 million, and it's all mine. I've already filed for divorce. You have 30 days to pack up and leave. Have a nice life. Rose." Tony's eyes widened in shock and rage as the letter fell from his hand. He kicked a chair in frustration, cursing loudly. How had he misjudged her so badly? He thought he had her completely under control. Defeated, he sank to the floor. Meanwhile, Rose was far away, lounging on a beach chair with the sea breeze ruffling her hair. She sipped a fruity cocktail and watched the waves, thinking about the cozy beach bungalow she had just made an offer on. Everything happens for a reason, Aunt Lily used to say. Rose raised her glass to the sky in a silent toast, grateful for her wise aunt's lesson and the unexpected fortune. For the first time in a long while, she eagerly anticipated the surprises life had in store.